Welcome back to the channel. Before we talk about filing taxes without W-2, let me say a few things. First things first. See, when you have a missing W-2, what's the problem? You have to understand that employers have until January 31st to issue W-2s to employees, and some drop them in the mail on that date, while others experience difficulties in getting them out on time. So if you have not received your W-2 yet, there is no reason to worry. Don't panic. There are still plenty of options to ensure that you file accurately and on time. So before we actually walk you through what to do if you have not received a W-2, let's start with the basic real quick. What is a W-2 and who receives one? So Form W-2 is completed by an employer and contains important information that you need to complete your tax returns. So it basically tracks your total wages for the year and the amount of federal, state, and other taxes withheld from your paycheck. This is really important. So a W-2 may also contain information about tips, contributions to 401k, contributions to a health savings account, premiums your employer pays for health coverage, and a variety of other numbers that will depends on what kind of job category you have and who really receives a W-2. So usually you will receive a W-2 if you are considered an employee, not a contractor, because there are other considerations for contractors. Okay, you may also receive multiple W-2s if you have, let's say you changed jobs during the calendar year, the last calendar year that is, or if you work more than one job where you are considered an employee. However, if you work as an independent contractor, the company will likely send you Form 1099 NEC or 1099 MIS instead of a W-2. So this is really important. So a Form 1099 NEC or MIS tracks your total wages and other fees for the year like a W-2, but for contractors. So a big difference between the two forms is that businesses that hire independent contractors do not typically withhold federal income taxes or Social Security and Medicare taxes from the contractor's payments. Okay, it is the responsibility of the contractor to actually estimate those taxes and pay them quarterly throughout the year. So this is a big distinction you need to have. So now you have a clear idea of what we talk about when we mention W-2 versus 1099 MIS or 1099 NEC. Now let me talk to you about the steps you need to have, okay? So if you are waiting for your W-2, here are the steps you can take right now to find it. Step number one, I want you to check online. See, the thing here is that nowadays, many employers issue Form W-2 electronically to employees rather. So, but the thing is, it doesn't mean that they will always email the form to you, as it's not particularly secure. Think about it. This is your private information right there. Okay, with all the hacking going on, you never know. So instead, the employer will email you a link to an online portal when you can download the form yourself. So once in a while, those emails get caught in your spam folder or sent to the wrong email address. Things happen, okay? That's why I want you to right now, I want you to if it's around January 31st and you have not received your W-2, please check your spam folder to see if they notice one up there. If your employer has an online portal where you access paycheck information, time cards, and other employment information, I want you right now to log into that website to see if your W-2 can be accessed there. Okay, you never know. So even if you cannot find it in your mail or online, you may still be able to get it electronically. So employers not only send W-2s electronically to employees, but to the IRS as well. Okay, so this is what it is. And the thing is, you have a lot of software tools out there. For example, you have H&R Block, you have TurboTax, you have Tax Act. Those software tools can import your W-2 electronically and will actually notify you when your W-2 is available to start your taxes. Okay, so you have a lot of options. So step number one, I want you to check online right now. Step number two, please, you can ask your employer. Yeah, because if your online search leaves you empty-handed, contact your employer's payroll or HR department and ask them how they, whether they issued your W-2 in the first place. And if they did, how did they issue it? If they mailed it to an old or incorrect address, the post office may have returned it to the employer. So if that's the case, what do? You can ask your employer to reissue your W-2 if you want to keep a paper file for your record. If your W-2 went missing because of a mail, let's say a mail snafu, you can see the tool like HR block, H&R block, TurboTax, Tax Act, and what have you, to retrieve a copy for you. So as long as, see, the whole thing is, as long as your employer issued a W-2 to you, the software tool, the tax software tool that you're using can actually retrieve it. Very important. So you have a lot of options. Check online, ask your employer. Step number 3, real quick. What I want you to do here is that you have the option to contact the IRS. See, the whole thing here is that the good thing is W-2 is sent to various parties, including the IRS and also your state tax authorities. Okay, so what happens if your employer truly never issued your W-2? Perhaps they went out of business, stuff happens, or they're not responding to your request for W-2, and it's January 31st or it's March 31st, and you I need to file my taxes right now because I can't really wait. If that's the case, it's time to try. You can actually contact the IRS. So the IRS recommends contacting your employer first and waiting until the end of February to see if your W-2 arrives before getting the agency involved. I mean, the agency is already busy, so the thing is, listen, they have the data though. They do have it, but it's just that it takes longer for them to process your request. It's a lot faster if you contact your employer or just log on to the online portal that I just spoke about earlier. So the IRS wants you to contact your employer first, and you want to wait until the end of February. Okay. So if you have met those 2 requirements, you can contact the IRS or make an appointment at a Taxpayer Assistance Center, a TAC, if there is one near you. So whether you call or visit a TAC in person, be ready to provide the following information. So I want you to have right now. So write things down. Write it down. So you need to have your name, address, social security number, and phone number. So that's the first thing. Second thing, the employer's name, address, phone number, and tax ID if you have it. So that will be your employer EIN, so employer identification number. And you have to mention also the date you have worked for the employer. So if it is, let's say, January 1st to December 31st, you want to mention that. And you need to talk about an estimate of your wages and federal income tax withheld. You can usually find this information on your last pay stub for the tax year. So I want you to go right now to your last pay stub and look at it. Okay, so because the pay stub will track a cumulative data for you. So what will happen here is that the IRS will contact your employer on your behalf to request the missing form and remind the employer of the penalties for failing to issue Form W-2. You have to understand, an employer has a responsibility to issue Form W-2 to various parties, as I just said, to you, the recipient, to the state tax authorities, and to the IRS. So I hope that you are with me. So step number 1, you want to check online. Step number 2, you want to ask your employer. Step number 3, you want to contact the IRS. Step number 4, I want you to file something called Form 4852 with your tax return. 4852. Remember that. It's very important. Remember that. So if IRS intervention still does not produce the form you need and you want to file by the tax deadline, that is April 15th, what do? Well, fill out Form 4852. So basically, 4852 is just a substitute. It is a substitute for Form W-2 that taxpayers can complete if, and there are only 2 scenarios here, if they have not received a W-2 or their employer issued an incorrect W-2. In practice, what happens here is that sometimes if the employer went out of business, this could also be a strong scenario for you to file Form 4852. So please do not file Form 4852 if you don't have the scenario that I just described earlier. Okay, it's not a substitute like you can just I'm just not finding my W-2, whatever, that I'm just going to file this form. No, there is a condition, there is a prerequisite that you need to go through before filing Form 4852. Think about this form as the last resort. Okay, so again, let me just repeat the 2 scenarios. If you have not received the W-2 or your employer issued an incorrect W-2. So the thing here is that if you use a tax software, let's say a tax preparation software, Tax Act, H&R Block, TurboTax, and whatnot, What happens here, the software will ask you a few questions to estimate your total wages and withholding using your final pay stub, and fill out Form 4852 based on those answers. Step number 5. What I want you to do now is there's something called a wage and income transcript. You want to request that. You want to request a wage and income transcript. So if you file, let's say, let's just break it down. If you filed your return using Form 4852 because you have waited and you can't really wait anymore, and you want to verify that the information you included on your return agrees with the income your employer reported to the IRS, you can request a wage and income transcript from the IRS. So basically, this transcript shows data from the informational returns that the IRS receives from issuers like your employer, including Form W-2 and 1099. So those are called informational returns because you're not paying taxes by filing them. Similar forms include Form 1065 for an LLC or Form 1120S for an S corporation. Those are informational returns. Okay, so you can request actually a wage and income transcript online via the Get Transcript online tool or by mail using Form 4506T. Very important, this is the Form 4506T. So unfortunately, it takes a while for the IRS to compile all this information. You have to remember, they are dealing with tens of millions of taxpayers. And during tax season, it's very busy, so they can't really get back to you real quick. So you have to be patient. Your transcript might not be complete until July, so trying to order it before the tax deadline might not work. What happened here is that once you receive the transcript, you can use it to compare the information you actually provided on Form 4852, remember that form that you filed earlier, to the wage and withholding information that the IRS has on record. So it's all about you cross-checking what you have versus what they have. And that's what you want anyway, right? So how do you file Form 4852? How do you actually do it? Well, even though you can find the form online, as I've said this before, you cannot submit it to the IRS electronically. Because if you do, it will never go through. You have to print it out, fill it out, and mail it to the IRS along with everything else. And to fill it out, you need to have a detailed explanation of how you attempted to obtain the proper W-2 form for your employer's address and name, a statement that explains how you came up with the data you entered, right? It's very important. You did not make those numbers up, and the estimated wages and withheld taxes that you would otherwise have listed on the W-2. Remember, what I want to say here is that the information that you enter on Form 4852 is supposed to be a good faith estimate. However, if you obtain information that suggests this data was not correct later, you are still supposed to file your amended tax return with the newly acquired information. Step number 6, you want to amend your return maybe. Because the thing here is that you are trying to file taxes without a W-2, right? So we're actually giving you a constellation of scenarios that will allow you to actually do things the proper way. So maybe you want to amend your return. Let's say if you receive a W-2 or order a wage and income transcript after filing your tax return, and the information that you receive is different from what you reported on your tax return, you may need to amend your tax return. That's what I just said. It's important to actually do this because you want the IRS to have similar information that you have, right? So that you actually can avoid any penalties and any whatever issues later on. Okay, so the thing is, you can use tax preparation software such as Tax Act, H&R Block, Credit Karma, TurboTax. You can actually what will happen here is that those software tools can help you make any necessary corrections and file Form 1040X easily and accurately. So the amended tax return is called Form 1040X. Very important, okay? Now the thing here is that if you're not comfortable, if you have no idea what Form 1040X is, or you're just scared that you might actually make a mistake, you can always try to find somebody else to do it for you. You can hire a tax accountant or a tax preparer. Okay, it's very important. Don't do things yourself that you don't understand. And the thing here is that depending on the complexity of your taxes, you might need to hire somebody who who is a little bit advanced in terms of skill set. We're talking here about a CPA, a certified public accountant, an EA, an enrolled agent, or a tax attorney. Okay, this is really important. So you always have options. Or if you're, let's say your budget does not allow you to actually hire an expert, go to a taxpayer assistance center. There are taxpayer assistance centers spread all across the country, and they're there to help you, and they'll help you for free. Okay, so it's always easier to file a tax return with an accurate W-2 than without it. But if you have not received your form and need to file, you have options. Okay, so those options that I just gave you, the 6 options that I just gave you, actually can help you get the information you need to file a complete and accurate return, even if your W-2 is really tough to track down, or you don't really have an idea where is it really is. That the thing here is that you have an April 15th deadline to abide by, and you need to file by that date, or at least file an extension. Now, what does the law really say? Because we really need to understand really what the law says about W-2s and not filing without W-2s, or filing without W-2s and whatnot. So technically, is it legal to file without W-2? Let's just talk about that, because this is really important. Because if your employer is not sending in the right data, what do? Are you actually complying with the law, or should you? So technically, you could still file your taxes legally without the W-2 form, as long as you are filing electronically. However, if you are going to do so correctly, there is a bunch of information from your W-2 you will need nonetheless. Because think about it, when you think about W-2, this is just a paper that lists a bunch of information, right? If you can get that info independently from the W-2, you are good to go. Because what the IRS really cares about is the data that you report to them and the taxes you pay on your income. They don't care about paperwork. It's not like they really care so much about your W-2s and whatnot. No. So you will need a couple of let's say some pieces of information, such as any separate local income taxes withheld, Medicare tax withheld, your complete wages, including other compensation like tips. Don't forget the tips, very important. You pay taxes on tips. You have Social Security tax withheld, Social Security tips and wages, and those are separate items. Identification number of your employer, so your EIN that I mentioned earlier, very important. It's a 9-digit number. And federal income tax withheld from your income, state income tax withheld, name and address of your employer. Because what the IRS is going to do here, they are going to reconcile what you send them versus what they can get independently from the employer you identified in your filing. Okay, because the IRS constantly wants to make sure they have info from 2 or 3 parties. That way, their algorithm, because they do have an algorithm that will cross-check all those pieces of information and figure out whether we are having something accurate here. So this is why whenever you contact the IRS, if you decide to file without a W-2, make sure you are as precise as possible. That way, you have no issues later on. No audit, no request for information, none of that. Before we close today's conversation, let's quickly talk about independent contractors. I mentioned that earlier, but it is important because when we talk about filing taxes without W-2, obviously, if you are an independent contractor, you're not getting a W-2. I said that earlier, right? You are getting the 1099 MIS or 1099 NEC. Probably a 1099 NEC. And the reason you're not getting a W-2 is primarily because you're not having any taxes withheld when you are working during the year, and basically you're not even considered an employee. Okay, so if you are working as an independent contractor, you don't file a W-2 form in the first place. Okay, instead, any company that paid you over $600 for your work in the previous year is supposed to send a 1099 form instead. So this form largely serves a similar purpose to the W-2, but as I just mentioned, it does not show any withholding. Okay, any withholdings, and this is because you are responsible for your taxes as an independent contractor. So what the thing is that I'm speaking about self-employment taxes. The quarterly filings that we spoke about on other shows. Those are really important. You got to pay you got to pay there are other taxes you have to pay at the state level, for example, or at the county level. I mean, there are some county and municipalities that they levy taxes also. So make sure you are compliant across the board. Okay. So when we talk about 1099, so the form largely serves the same purpose. Okay. However, if a company does not send you the form 1099 they were supposed to, all of the stuff we told you about the W-2 still applies. And your next course of action is largely the same. Okay, so you can contact the company that was supposed to send you the W-2 in the first place. And if that doesn't solve the issue, you file Form 4852 with your taxes and contact the IRS yourself. Okay, same procedure. So trying to contact they should have sent this to you either via USPS mail or via their electronic portal, via email. If you don't have that, contact the HR department, or if they have let's say a specific department that caters to independent contractors, contact that department and just say, listen, I haven't received my 1099. I would love to have that because I just want to file my taxes. And if nothing happens, be persistent. Okay, sometimes maybe the company is dealing with gazillions of independent contractors. You're not the only one, so you have to be patient and be persistent. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. So in today's conversation, I was explaining to you how to file taxes without a W-2 form. So step number 1, check online. Step number 2, you want to ask your employer. Number 3, contact the IRS. Number 4, file Form 4852 with your tax return. Number 5, you want to request a wage and income transcript. Okay, and on number 6, just amend your return. Okay, and it is definitely legal to file taxes without W-2s, but ideally you want to have that form. Thank you so much for your attention. I will speak to you another time, but until then, remember, stay marvelous.